All right, it is the top of the hour, so we're going to get started. Welcome everyone to the Introduction to Jira Align webinar. Over the next hour, we are going to be talking about none other than Jira Align and digging into the tool with a live demo as well. Before we get into our content, just some quick introductions. My name is Vicki Murphy. I'm an enterprise solutions architect with Expium. It's really just a fancy way to say that I work with a lot of the Atlassian tools, especially Jira Align, and I work with our customers to implement those tools in the way that works best for them. Expium is a platinum solutions partner with Atlassian, and I will be talking a bit more about who we are and what our services are in a little bit, about halfway through the webinar. I'm also joined today by one of my colleagues, Elizabeth Wheeler. She's going to be helping out with answering some questions as well as throwing some helpful resources for you in the chat. One fun thing to announce is that during this webinar, we're actually going to be doing a swag giveaway. So we will be announcing some winners of a custom pair of Ray-Ban sunglasses. So do stay tuned to see if you are a lucky recipient. We'll announce some of the winners about halfway through and the rest at the end of the webinar as well. All right, let's go ahead and look at what's on our agenda for the day. We are wrapping up with the introductions with this slide. Then we're going to jump into a couple of concepts. I have a few more PowerPoint slides to show you. Don't like to spend a lot of time in slides in these webinars, but I do think there are some really helpful diagrams to really understand the concepts around Jira Align before we dig into the live demonstration. You'll hear me say a lot today that Jira Align is a very large tool. With that being said, I like to focus the demonstration portion on the areas of the tool that we see being used the most by our customers, both at the beginning of their use of Jira Align as well as throughout their entire use of it, so months after they've implemented as well. At the end, we'll also do a Q&A, so if you have any questions for me, do throw those in the Q&A panel in Zoom. We'll answer as many of those at the end as we can, or Elizabeth may answer some of them via the Q&A panel as well. All right. Let's go ahead and jump into the first concept. I always like to start this webinar by talking about the positioning of Jira Align. Jira Align is designed for organizations that have implemented or in the process of implementing a framework for scaled Agile, such as the SAFe or the Spotify model. We have found that organizations are most successful with Jira Align implementations when they have previously implemented at least one program increment. You may have heard this called PI or quarterly planning increment from a process perspective. And why we recommend that is learning the process and the tool can be difficult for end users. And also that process is really what drives the configuration decisions of Jira Align itself. So having a little bit of that under our belt just makes the configuration portion of the implementation that much easier. As I mentioned, Jira Align really is a large-scale tool meant for enterprises. It is designed for enterprises that have at least 500 developers, and it does come at a higher price point than other Atlassian tools like Jira. We do believe that smaller organizations may struggle with either the overall size of the tool or potentially that higher price point. If you're from a smaller organization and you think you may be in this boat, don't fret. There's still a lot of really great options for you in the Atlassian ecosystem. I'm going to talk about an alternative later in these slides, and then I'll point you to a couple of resources around those as well. So do stay on for that bit. What we will see today in the live demonstration portion is that Jira Align really is meant to handle the planning and the visualization of our work from the CEO strategic level all the way down to our team members at that ground level of work. And it is this robust application that aligns that work throughout the enterprise. Scale planning is one of the main concepts that plays into Jira Align. This image may be familiar to you if you've gone through a scaled planning training, or you may have seen something similar in your training. It is very busy, but what I like about it is that I think it starts to give some insight into that complexity of planning at scale. And as we go through this webinar, I think you'll see how Jira Align can really start to help with that complexity. I also like to introduce these different layers. When we get into the tool itself, you will see that the tool is really organized around these ideas of layers of scale. In the bottom corner here, we have our sprint planning. This is really that team level. We're working in our sprints or iterations. We're working on our stories. In box 3 here, we have our big room planning. This is that team of teams level. You've probably heard it called PI planning or big room planning. We're using visualizations like our program board, our program backlog. We're working on our features to plan out through that increment time box. We also have master planning. This is really the portfolio level. We're working with our epics. We're doing a lot of estimation, prioritization. A lot of times budgeting happens at this level, and we're determining if we're going to pivot or persevere with these new ideas. And then we also have the idea of product management. Really, what is our company working on overall? As you can start to see here, starting an Agile at scale transformation or scaling Agile in your company can be a very long and complex undertaking. And tools are really never going to define that process or the multiple processes needed for scaled Agile. But where tools like Jira Align really become invaluable is the ability to plan, track, and visualize that work across our enterprise. Now let's go ahead and start talking about how those layers of scale and scaled planning start to fit into Jira Align. What Jira Align really helps us with is syncing people, the work they do, and time across the enterprise. We're able to, again, really go from that enterprise strategic level all the way down to the team level and roll that information both up the hierarchy and back down. Jira Align also offers product management, strategic portfolio, and scale development modules that really help us with that cross-team and cross-functional collaboration all within the same tool. Other perks of Jira Align, we're able to analyze our data and information in real time as updates are being made. And this starts to lead us to use Jira Align as really the single source of truth for that execution and planning all throughout the hierarchy. What I really like about this diagram and why I showed this one in particular is it starts to introduce the concept of layering Jira Align with Jira software. Jira Align is intended to layer with one or more Jira software instances, so it really just integrates with it. Little bit of background here. Jira Align used to be a tool called Agile Craft, and when it was first created, it was intended for everyone in the entire organization to work in one place. Atlassian acquired Agile Craft a few years ago and turned it into Jira Align, and they began really integrating Jira Align with Jira software. Jira software is a really great team level tool. If you already use this, you already have probably seen the benefits of things like our Agile boards, our filters and dashboards and other visualizations within the tool that really are great for our team level planning and execution. But when we start to scale up the organization into our program portfolio and other layers of scale, we really need a tool that's going to help facilitate, again, that alignment throughout our organization at those various levels. And that is really where Jira Align starts to shine. So our teams are still working in Jira software, that information's rolling into Jira Align. So we get that roll up of information and back down again. And then we can use those modules at the higher levels of scale in Jira Align. As Jira Align helps us plan and execute our work across the enterprises, it uses those three hierarchies that I mentioned earlier: people, work, and time. Sometimes this slide can be a little bit overwhelming, but in reality, this is really what our work boils down to. Who's doing the work, what work are they doing it, and what time box are they doing it in? And this diagram really is how Jira Align is organized. Hierarchy 1 is the people. It's these words in white here. We start at our enterprise level. Again, this is typically your C-suite, high up in the organization here. That breaks down into our portfolio, potentially a solution level. We, of course, have the program, that team of teams level, and then again, our base level at the team. At each of these levels, we're doing different types of work. So we start up with our strategy. What are we doing as an organization to stay competitive? What is that long-term strategy? Maybe 3, maybe 5, maybe even 10 years into the future. Then we break that down into our themes, more actionable items here. Those themes then break down into our portfolio epics, maybe capabilities if you're using a solution level. And then down into our features, those items of work that we are actually delivering to our customers. Teams then break those features down into their stories and tasks throughout ceremonies like PI planning. At each of these levels, when we're doing different types of work, we're also talking about different time frames. Again, at the strategy level, we're talking potentially year, maybe even multiple years into the future. And that's what we capture with the idea of a strategic snapshot in Jira Align. At our other levels of scale, we're typically working with one or more program increments, or you may call this a quarterly increment. And at the team level, we're working with our sprints and our releases. We also have other modules in Jira Align in this business vectors section here that really do help us with that planning and execution. Things like our OKRs, our objectives and key results, our budgeting, our value streams, etc. When we get into the Jira Align demo in just a moment, you'll start to see all these concepts come together. All right, a little bit more detail about Jira Align. There are two editions of Jira Align, the standard and the enterprise level. Typically, most customers go with the enterprise level because that does give you a sandbox to test configuration and integration with Jira software as well. There are a couple of add-ons to Jira Align at this time. There is a time tracking add-on as well as Enterprise Insights. Enterprise Insights is really a data lake of information from Jira Align that can integrate with a business business intelligence tool like Power BI, for example. Lastly, Atlassian is investing in Jira Align, and there are some new and upcoming updates. A couple releases ago, Atlassian launched the new objectives tree experience. This is a big update to the UI in Jira Align and really helps us visualize our objectives and our key results a bit better. We don't typically cover the objectives tree in this webinar, but we are going to send a link in the chat to a deep dive video we did on this. And if we have some time in the Q&A section, and if anybody's interested in viewing it, you can let me know in the Q&A panel in Zoom and we can take a look at that. Another great update in the latest release, this actually doesn't hit production instances until tomorrow, so Friday, December 2nd, 2022, is the ability to sync the t-shirt size field bidirectionally between Jira and Jira Align. In the chat, Elizabeth is also going to put a second link to our latest Jira Align update breakdown video. I talk all about how you can set up this configuration and a couple of cautions just to make sure you're accounting for any potential data issues before you make that change. We also continue to see a lot of updates with the API 2.0 and the Jira connector improvements with each release as well. All right. Now that we've talked a bit about Jira Align, and you've heard me say over and over again that it is a large tool, a very common question we get is, okay, what does it really take to implement this tool? And what we see here is really the implementation roadmap that you will see regardless of who you use as an implementation partner. So we're usually talking about a 3-month period, and we like to start with a single program or Agile release train, that team of teams level. In the little green boxes here, you'll see the general phases that we go through. We go through a planning phase, making sure we have the right people involved to make the right decisions. We go through a discovery phase, learning how you do things now, learning what your desired future state is, and working to map that out of how we're going to handle that. We also go through, of course, configuration. We do training, and then we start to use the tools in a PI planning ceremony. After that, we then start to begin to expand and scale. So bringing in more programs, expanding up into that portfolio level as well. If you have any questions about implementing Jira Align, please feel free to reach out to us, and we are happy to share more information if you have any questions. Before we jump into the Jira Align demo, I do want to circle back to that idea of having other Atlassian tools that can be very helpful for scaling or beginning your scaled Agile journey. If Jira Align maybe isn't the right option for you at this time, Advanced Roadmaps is a great second option. So this was formerly called Portfolio for Jira. And Advanced Roadmaps, as the name suggests, really is a road mapping tool that can also be used to help us scale and is now included in the Jira Cloud Premium and Jira Data Center instances, as well as any enterprise cloud instances. This is really great for growing Agile organizations that need that visibility, shared focus, and accurate delivery across one or multiple teams. It also allows you to do that planning across multiple teams so you can align your work to the higher level initiatives. And as you'll see today, Jira Align does have a bit more robust capability around the higher level planning. But if you're just starting out on your scale journey, advanced roadmaps can be a great tool for those team members that are primarily already working in Jira, or if you're moving into Jira as well. We actually do another free webinar that goes into a deeper look into advanced roadmaps. So if you're interested in this topic, go ahead and check out our portfolio management in Jira webinar. Elizabeth's going to throw a link to that in the chat. It's another free 1-hour webinar. I believe the next one is coming up in February. We're now going to get into Jira Align and talk about some of those highlights of the tool. Let me give a little refresh here. All right, so I like to start this by talking about first the navigation of the tool. And why I like to start with that is first, it's a little bit different than our other Atlassian products like Jira. And also, it really starts to just show that organization around those layers of scale and around those concepts of scaling Agile in your organization. The main way that we navigate Jira Align is through this blue navigation panel here. So at the top, we have a home button, takes you to the page you see here. You have your profile where you can update your settings as expected. And I'm going to jump down, starting with this web icon here. This is where we start to see those layers of scale. If you remember back to those diagrams I showed, they always start with the enterprise level. Well, right here in the tool, we start with the enterprise level. At that level, we're dealing with strategy. You see that throughout all of these module options: strategy room, strategic backlog, strategic snapshots, etc. Below that, we have our portfolio level. Again, we're dealing with our themes and our epics at this level. We're also dealing with things like our vision as well. And there's even more options under these show all menus here. The solution level isn't always necessary, so it just depends on how you're implementing that scaled Agile process, but it is available in the tool if you need it. And then we have the program, that team of teams level. We're going to take a look at a lot of modules in here. This is where Jira Align really starts to shine with that planning and execution of our work at the program level, helping us align those multiple teams into a team of teams layer. We do have a team layer. Keep in mind, Atlassian really is meaning or intending for Jira software to be the primary team tool. We do sync that team information, their work items, their estimates, etc., into Jira Align. So there is still a team layer here, though it is intended that teams are primarily working in Jira software. So we're not going to take a look at a ton here today. And of course, we have that product module. Depends on how you're organized if you need to use this, but if you do, it's another option available to you in the tool. As you can see, just by clicking through these menus, Jira Align really is organized around that idea of scaling a process across your organization. And it also does have a lot of modules here. So again, we're going to really highlight those areas of the tool that really are heavily used across organizations. At the top here, this gray bar is what we refer to as the context bar. And I always like to mention this because it is actually a filter across your entire Jira Align instance. So this allows you to make that selection of what layer of scale you're looking for, what time box you're looking for, and it filters all of those modules that you saw. Here we can again start to see that organization of our tool here. So we have our enterprise layer, we have multiple portfolios, we have multiple programs, we have multiple teams. All right here, again, we can start to see how those all start to link together. We also can choose our time increment. I have a PI selected, but you can also do some specific date ranges. And then we also are able to add in some additional configurations here. I'm going to jump back to the blue bar because I forgot to mention a couple of quick helpful tips. There is a lot of different modules available here. When you first jump into the tool, this can be quite overwhelming. When we start an implementation with our customers, we often like to toggle a lot of these off. And as their process matures and their use of Jira Align matures, we start toggling them back on just to make the usability of the tool easier. Even with doing that, it can still be a lot to learn how to navigate this tool. So I always like to point out that there is a search icon here that does search that entire navigation panel. So you can start to search for something like program and see what all pops up here. You can also favorite pages that you frequent so that you can get to them quickly. And there is a recents tab as well. So you can jump in here and see where you've recently been. There's a lot of interlinking between the modules. So this can be really useful if you aren't quite sure where you navigated to or from. All right. Up on the gray bar, I also like to mention that there's a second search icon here. This is the work item search. I like to remember this by the work item search is right next to the create button where we can create the various levels of work. Of course, depending on your permissions in the tool will determine what you can create here. But right next to that, we can search for a work item. And the pro tip I like to give here is if you're looking for a work item number, you first want to put in that, not that symbol, the hashtag £, and then you can put in the work number. And it seems that somebody maybe updated the settings on this keyboard, so pretend that that was a hashtag there. The last one of the last navigation pieces I like to mention is the help button. Excuse me. This is a contextual help button, and what that means is that depending on what module you're viewing, will change what you actually see here. And it's going to show you the Atlassian documentation for that module. Here I see the latest release notes because I'm on the home page, but if I went to the program board, as we'll see later, this would show me documentation on the program board. This works for every view of Jira Align. It works for every report included in Jira Align. It will tell you what needs to go into that report, what values it's looking at, how to interpret the report, etc. Also works for administration pages if there are any admins or future admins on the call as well. It's one of my favorite pieces of the tool because I think it just is super helpful for new users and new admins. All right. I do like to jump into the admin section and just show one thing before we get into looking at the specific modules, and that is the terminology. And I like to show this for a couple reasons. First, I think it's helpful just to see that there is some customability here or customization options with the terminology. But also, if you already have Jira Align implemented, our terminology may be slightly different than what yours is. So if I'm clicking on a button and you think, oh, it usually says something different, it's probably the same button, probably does the same thing, but your admins may have already updated your terminology for you. So just be aware of that and keep that in mind. All right. Going into the looking at specific modules, I like to center these, what I show around the two overarching uses of Jira Align. The first is strategic top-down planning, and the second is the visualization of work and progress as it rolls up from that Agile team level to the other levels of scale. So starting with the strategic top-down planning, I like to start at the very top by showing the strategy room. The strategy room, need to make a quick selection here, shows us that strategy over time. We start at the top with our mission, vision, and values, so we can input these into the tool and we can see them directly here. It just helps us all align around, again, what that mission, our vision, and our values are as a company. When we scroll down, we see our strategic pyramid. We start to see how this all starts to roll up. How do our mission, vision, and values, how are those executed through our long-term goals, our yearly goals, our quarterly goals? Again, these are customizable terms, and some of these can be toggled on and off. So if you have less layers of goals or more, we can customize some of that. We then start to break that down into our actual work items, our themes, our epics, and our features, and we can start to see a quick snapshot of all of that here. Below that, we then have an OKR heat map, so that objectives and key results. How are we actually doing at achieving our overall goals, achieving our objectives? And we can see a heat map score of that here. Looks like we're maybe not doing so hot with our selection in our context bar here. So we maybe need to start linking up with some of those stakeholders and seeing what's going on. Also from here, we can get into our OKR tree, actually digging into those objectives and key results and seeing the hierarchy here as well. Right. On the far right, we have our snapshot progress. Again, looking at how we are working, how we're going at completing our actual work items here. And our execution against our outcomes. When it comes to our strategic goals that are linked to themes, how are we doing at executing those and so down and so far down the hierarchy here. All right. I also like to just jump into the strategic backlog really quick so you can just see this is where we do create those mission, vision, and values. And we can start to see that hierarchy here as well. Jumping down to the portfolio level, I like to always show the backlog. Again, thinking of that strategic top-down planning, we are doing a lot of that planning at the backlog or in the backlog view. Because I have a program increment selected here, I just want to call out that the backlog is actually compressed here by PI, and I can expand that by pressing this plus. Every level of scale has a backlog. We saw the strategic backlog. Here I am in the epic backlog. If I had a different selection in my context bar here, I'd be able to select my theme backlog here. All the backlogs work in the same way functionally. They just show that different level of scale. So a little bit about how the backlog works here. Of course, I'm seeing my epics, keeping in mind these are epics that are associated with the entities that I selected in my context bar. So all of these are related to my mobile program and my PI5. Below there, we see the epic list. I'm able to expand the caret here to see one layer down. So these are my epics that are broken down into features. I can see that hierarchy here. I can add in new features if needed. And similar to the backlog in Jira software that you may be familiar with, we are able to drag and drop this to rank the backlog as well. Over on the right, we see various fields. You can control what fields you see as columns in the column shown button here. Depending on your level of work item, depends on what fields are available, but you can make those selections here. We're also able to filter the backlog if needed and run a quick search. I'm going to flip down into the feature backlog here, and we'll take a look at these. The backlog works the same way. This time I'm looking at features that are broken down into stories. At the top here, I can see my PI progress for my program, also what our overall velocity is, and then what that estimate is. So the roll up again of story points from the team level here. Here I can see I have a lot estimated for this PI based on my velocity. I'm probably overloaded. Maybe we need to do some reworking of what we're bringing into this PI. Is some information you can start to gather here. Can also open up the feature here. And just to take a look at the different types of information that are available on our features. We're able to, of course, give in things like our descriptions, what program is executing the feature, what PI we are implementing this in or delivering this in, attach it to a release vehicle, give target sprints, etc. Most work items in Jira Align will also have this full details button where it will have even more fields for you to fill in. And at the bottom, you can see any linked items as well. So you can start to really see how this is related to other work items. So we can see what stories are attached, what our acceptance criteria is, if we have any risks, dependencies, or objectives as well. One of my favorite features of Jira Align is also the Why button here. What this will show you is some information about how this feature in particular relates to the overall strategy. So we see some details about the feature, which we can of course see on the details panel as well. But we also see some details about the epic that it is related to. We see some details about the theme that that epic is linked to. So where this feature fits in our overall strategy for the organization. We see some details about the weighted shortest job first, that WSJF value of the feature and of the epic. And there's also some additional details at the bottom, but this just starts to show how Jira Align is really trying to help us link our information across the hierarchy so that we can see how work fits into that broader strategy. Also, most work items, features, epics, etc., will have this process section over here where you can start to see how many story points, how many stories, etc., are in progress or have actually been accepted. Grab a drink here. All right. I am now going to jump into the program board. So again, thinking of the strategic planning capability of Jira Align, the program board is one of the areas that is really a fan favorite in the tool. If you aren't familiar with a program board, it is a tool that helps us plan out our features for our program increment. So very common in many scaled Agile processes, especially the scaled Agile framework or SAFe framework. On the program board, each of our rows here represent a team in our program, and each of the columns represent a sprint or iteration in our program increment. And during PI planning, teams are able to indicate when they expect to be able to complete a feature. So what we're looking at here, we have a lot of different icons. In the top right corner, we have, of course, a legend, so it will help you understand the icons. I also like to call out that there are different views here. If you click this little tree guy, what we're looking at is called the small view. It's just the icons. The heat map is even smaller. Don't see that being used too heavily, but the normal view is often a favorite for new users because it also shows you the title of the work item as well. I'm going to flip back to the small view just for my demonstration. I just think it's easier to see more on the board here. Our rectangles here represent our features, and you'll notice a little color coding with these. I like to call this stoplight or apply stoplight mentality here. Green means good. It means we've accepted these features or work is done. Red, yellow, and orange mean there are some risks, or not risks, but planning issues involved. Blue and gray are also good. So gray means not started and blue means in progress. Our little Chevy icon here, or plus symbol, represents our dependencies. So throughout PI planning, we are able to create dependencies in the tool and link them to our features. And then at the top, we have our objectives, and the color coding is the same on all of them. You can hover over any of the work items to see anything that's related. So if another team is helping with this feature, you will see that. You'll also see if an objective or a dependency are linked to this as well. You may be able to see in the bottom left corner that I also see a little pop-up window that's telling me there are planning issues. That's why it's red. If I open this guy up, I can actually see that what that planning issue is. So it's telling me there's some conflicts with the dependency associated with this feature. This will show multiple planning issues if there are multiple in really priority order, so what the biggest issue is. And then you can work through those with the intention to try and turn that back to a positive color, meaning that you've resolved those planning issues. After PI planning, what's really great about this board is that it is live and updating, meaning as we are completing our work throughout our program increment, we see that updating here. We see these features starting to turn green. If we are in this sprint, as it says here, really our program board is looking good because we've completed and accepted a lot of our work. Looking into the next sprint and at this sprint, those red, orange, and yellow ones really draw our attention and can be this can really be a visualization for us to center around as we're trying to solve those planning issues throughout the PI as well as in PI planning. All right. The last thing I like to call out, just another helpful tip, under the extra configs button here, there are several things you can turn on. I like to typically turn everything on, but if you want to filter down your program board view for any reason, you can utilize this. One thing to be aware of is that there is an unassigned features toggle. By default, this is always off. So I do recommend coming in here and toggling this on, just so if a feature is not associated, with a team, you're able to see that unassigned feature row here, which I think I just turned off. Seeing those unassigned features is very helpful, especially in PI planning if you go in with your features unassigned. There we go. All right. Part of PI planning, as I mentioned, is typically identifying dependencies. Jira Align does have a dependency module to help us track that. So as we create the dependencies, we can utilize the dependency grid here to get an understanding of what dependencies we may have requested of other people and what dependencies we have requested of us. Dependencies should always start with a conversation with the team that you are working with. But once you and the team agree that the dependency is valid, they can complete the work, you can log it into the tool here. Dependencies really have their own mini workflow in the tool of not committed, committed, and done. Here we can track really great pieces of information like when we need this work completed by and when the team has committed to it. We can link it to our feature where that dependency was discovered. We can say here easily who's requesting the dependency, who it depends on. And then we can start linking stories to actually execute the dependency. So you can see that all right here on this one work item. And then of course it's reflected over in our program board as well. We also have some great reporting around dependencies under the map section here. There are actually 5 different dependency maps. I like to show the wheel. I think it's a fan favorite. It's really showing you how all of these different entities, so our teams, our programs, are dependent on one another. You can select any of these items on the wheel and it will show you a little analysis over here on the right of what work is the Tiger team is responsible for and what they need from others. I think this is a great visualization if you're starting in your scaled journey to really understand how teams are dependent on one another and start to maybe reconcile some of that, maybe reordering your teams or rearranging them so that teams can really be cross-functional and do the work that they need to get done. Jira Align also has a module for risks. So a part of PI planning is really identifying risks to the potential plan. And we are able to log those risks directly in Jira Align as well. Jira Align does support the Roam methodology that is supported by the SAFe framework as well. And directly in the tool, we can add a lot of details, including exactly how we resolved it. At the bottom, you can see that Roam method. I like this part of the tool a lot because it really starts to help us implement that process, and it serves as really just a reference for our users. Risks can also be linked to work items like features, epics, program increments, etc. I also like to show the Roam report. I think it's a really great visualization around how we are actually managing those risks. This shows the risks for a program and a program increment, and then you can start to really see how we are managing those risks overall. I won't get into it today, but I do have a good soapbox about why accepted really shouldn't be used too often, and what we want to see is really a lot of risks being resolved or being mitigated here. All righty, I'm going to jump back into my slides real quick. As we've seen, Jira Align really is great for that strategic planning. In just a moment, I'm going to jump back in and talk about how we can use it for that roll-up of information and understanding the progress of our work. But first, I just want to talk a little bit more about XPM. XPM, again, is a Platinum Solutions partner with Atlassian, and we have several services that really fall into these 3 buckets of training, consulting, and custom development. We do lots of training opportunities, so we have a lot of these free webinars. We do one every Thursday at 11 a.m. Central Time. We also have training classes that you can purchase tickets to around certain tools like Jira, Confluence, Jira Service Management, etc. And I'll show you a little bit more about those upcoming opportunities in a moment. We also do consulting. This takes really many forms, implementations of tools, including Jira Align migrations, administrative support, etc. And we also do custom development. So if you ever run across a problem that isn't solvable out of the box in one of the Atlassian tools or with an existing marketplace add-on, we're able to also develop those solutions as well. We actually have a sister company that is a full stack development team that we can pull into our contracts quite easily to help us develop those solutions. Here's a little bit about our upcoming webinars and classes. We do actually have a Jira Bootcamp next week. Like I mentioned, Jira Align really does layer with Jira software, so it's good to also be aware of what Jira software can do and how that tool works. So Jira Bootcamp does go into great detail about how Jira can be configured and all the pieces and parts of that. So that is coming up next week, along with our Confluence Bootcamp as well. All right, if you have any questions about anything mentioned on this webinar or upcoming classes, you can always reach out to me here. And you can also join our Atlassian support group. This is really a group where you can ask any questions about any of the Atlassian ecosystem tools, and our experts here will respond. So it's a great LinkedIn group there. All right. I am going to now announce one of our winners of the Ray-Ban sunglasses. Congratulations to Melody Playford. We will be sending you a pair of the Ray-Ban sunglasses. Please do send your mailing address to Elizabeth. She's going to throw her email address in the chat, and we will ship those to you. We'll announce the rest of our winners at the end of the webinar. All right. Jumping back into Jira Align, again, the second portion of this demo, we're going to discuss the features of Jira Align that really help us visualize our work after we've done that planning. So we can do all of our strategic planning, we do our PI planning, identify dependencies, identify risks, and then we actually start to do the work. And there's a lot of great modules in Jira Align to help us understand our progress throughout our program increments and see that roll up of data from the team level on up as well. Great. The first place I like to show is the program room. Most of the layers of scale have a room. It really serves as a dashboard for that level of scale. The program room, of course, shows us information for our program and our program increment that we have selected in our context bar at the top. The program room is somewhat customizable. There are several gadgets that you see here. Under view configuration, you can toggle these on or off. And on the gadgets on the sidebar, you can drag these left or right or up or down. So you can organize them how you really like to view them. This is my favorite visualization here, but if you have your own Jira Align instance, yours may look a little bit different because there is some customization options. The program room is really a great place to start to get that information of how we're progressing across our PI. It has a lot of great metrics. I see this room being used really heavily in our program level ceremonies, things like Scrum of Scrums, PO sync, program sync, ceremonies like that. This can be really useful. Right at the top, we see some quick stats about our program increment. We have 56 features planned, we have 317 stories planned, and we have a total story point value of 1,949 planned. Again, this is starting to show us that roll-up of information, the stories that are linked to our features, and that roll-up of story points. Below that, I can then start to easily see our program load and our program velocity. So I see that our velocity is 2,000 points, and I see that we have a total of 1,839 story points planned. I will mention that with this little settings gear here, you can turn or toggle between the estimated versus actual estimates here. And I think this is one of the really great planning pieces of the tool as well. The estimated load here is, excuse me, the estimated load is derived from our feature estimation. So we estimate our features a lot of times in t-shirt size, and that gets converted in the background to points. So we can see here that as we went through that probably pre-PI planning process, we said that this was going to be a lot of points potentially. Through PI planning, our teams broke down those features into stories. They actually applied their own estimates, and we can toggle to actual here to see that roll up of the story points linked to our features in this PI. So you can start to see the difference between who's planning the work and who's executing the work, and use this as a guide to really start to hone in your estimation process here. This was a bit of an egregious example here with that large of a difference, but still, even if it's a small difference, you can start to really try and figure out how you can start to estimate better. Below, we then start to see our team progress. How is each team in this program actually performing throughout our PI? Are they completing their work? We can see this in points, percentage of points, as well as a count. You can hover over this to see some more details as well. And then we see our team load. So based on their average velocity, how have they loaded up their backlog for this PI? We see some quick gadgets with our release vehicles, as well as our risks. We can see how we roamed them here quite easily. We can also see how we, if they are open or closed. We see similar things on the right here with our objectives and our dependencies. On any of these, you can actually hover over them, and there are some quick links to get to those grids that I showed you, as well as our dependency map or relevant report, and to add a new one in as well. Again, this is a great place to really center around how are we doing as a program? Are we getting our dependencies resolved? Are we on track with our objectives, etc.? We also have a good progress report here. How much time is left in our PI? Again, how are we going about executing our objectives and our stories here, as well as our other work items. In the middle, we have our PI planning checklist. This is interactive, so this can be customized to actually help guide your users through that process, and they can check them off when they've completed each step. We then have a roadmap of our PI, so each sprint is identified here, and we see the progress we're making through each sprint as well. And then we, of course, have our backlog. This is also interactive. It is, again, filtered based on the PI we've selected. What's also great about this view is at the top, you can toggle down into a specific team. So here we're viewing the program view, all of the teams in the program together, but we can toggle this down into a specific team if needed. All right. So that is the program room. Like I mentioned, there are rooms at other levels of scale. There is a portfolio room. We took a look at the strategy room. The portfolio room, I do need to select a portfolio from my context bar here. But it shows us our execution at the portfolio level. So looking at over here on the right, all of the programs that make up the portfolio this time, looking at our theme progress, how we are working towards completing those. Again, this is looking down through the hierarchy, looking at how we're completing stories linked to features, linked to epics up into these themes as well. And you can view this for one or more program increments as well to see your program increment roadmap. We also have a couple of other tabs here. There is a financials tab. So at our epic and theme level, we are putting in some financial information, some budgeting information, and we can start to see some reports around that as well as our resources here as well. All right. If you are using the product layer, again, just depends on how you're organized and if you need this functionality in the tool, but there is a product room that does show us a bit of information. I need to change this to our mobile app suite here. Shows us some information around that product and the work items that are linked to that as well. All right, the last thing I really like to show is the reports module. There are a lot of reports in Jira Align. I just like to scroll through this a few times. I've scrolled about 4 times. I'm only down to the E's, and these are in alphabetical order. One thing I always like to advise is that not all reports are created equally. And what I mean by that is when people see all of these reports in Jira Align, I've often seen that they feel that every single report must provide some kind of value to them. And that's not always necessarily true. These are great reports, but everyone's process is different. The metrics everyone's looking for may be different, and different reports may serve those needs more than others. So reports can be toggled on and off. So if there really is a report that just doesn't provide value to your organization, it can be toggled off by administrators. And I always like to just give the advice that before coming in and digging into every report, think about the metric that you're really looking for and then work to find one that actually supports that metric. I think it's a little bit easier of a way to dig through these reports and learn which ones are valuable for you. I also like to just give a couple of tips with searching for reports. So there are some quick filters over here on the left. Those are quite useful. This search button is actually a piece of AI in the tool. It's actually looking for you to put in a question. I don't like to commit these questions to memory. I just don't work that way. But what does work is a Control F on the browser. You can start to look for a specific report like impediments and risks or that risk roam report here. I'll also mention again that you can open any of these up. I know we looked at this one previously, so I won't go into details, but the help button does work on all of these reports. So if you are digging into the reports, you can always use this to learn what prerequisites the report is expecting, what data it's looking at, and how to interpret it as well. This wraps up the live demo of Jira Align. Hopefully this has been helpful for you. What Ooh, lost my train of thought there. Hopefully this has been helpful for you to see that Jira Align really is a very large tool, but it can be beneficial for enterprises to really help with that top-down planning, as well as your progress across your program increments and other time boxes as well. Right. Before we open up the floor for Q&A, I want to announce our last two winners for the Ray-Ban sunglasses. All right. Apologies if I mispronounce anyone's name here, but Murugan Mitapali, you are a winner, and Catherine Schultz, you've won a pair of XBM Ray-Bans as well. So again, if you'll send your mailing addresses to Elizabeth's email that she's putting in the chat, we can ship those to you. All right. Now we will go ahead and open up the Q&A. Q&A panel here. All right, great question from Ankita. Can we connect Roam to a feature? So the Roam functionality is specific to the risk work item. I'll jump back into the tool here just to show you, but we are able to link a risk to a feature. So typically the process is we're working on planning out our feature. We identify that there is some type of risk involved. Oops, I went to features and not risk, but we are able to come down here and link those risks. But let me open up a risk so you can see how we do that. And then you can link that risk to several work items. So you can do features, epics, or themes, as well as a PI. So if you're identifying PI risks, you can link that to a feature here. And then on that feature details panel, as you just saw, you can actually see those risks directly. So I would go through that path. All right. Another question, what are different reports in Jira Align and metrics? So we took a look at all of the different reports here. There are several. We don't have a ton of time to dig through those. I would say the best place to go for some quick metrics is typically that program room. Lots of great metrics around program load, program progress, team progress, etc. And then from here, it really just depends on the various metrics that you are looking for. So really encourage looking at what those metrics might be, and then kind of jotting those down and then taking a look at these reports and what may be useful. There's of course some kind of standard ones like burn downs are pretty common and pretty useful. There's some cycle time reports, etc. When it gets to the more niche, oops, not the report I was looking for. When it gets to some more niche metrics, you can dig into some of those other reports. All right, let's see if we have any others here. All right, can you show that new objectives tree view? Absolutely. So the objectives tree is at the enterprise level here. The new interface was released a couple releases ago, so probably a month or two ago, and Atlassian has been making updates to this throughout the last couple of releases as well. So you can expect to see a little bit more here. As you can see, this interface is quite updated from the other modules I've been showing. Looks a lot similar, a lot more similar to the other Atlassian products, which is really great to see. Here, one of the biggest additions are the quick filters that show you at a quick glance where your various objectives are status-wise. And then we can dig into each of those. So as you create objectives, you can give your key results. You can check in on those results to see where you're at progress-wise, and some more details here as well. If you've used this view before and you like the hierarchy view, under actions here, you can actually click on one of these. And that one doesn't have any children, but you could see the parents and children of these as well. Let's see if this guy has anything. All right. So you can start to see how those link to goals and whatnot. I don't have a great example of that, unfortunately, but it is still there. Couple of things, if you have Jira Align and you aren't seeing this new view, you do need to reach out to Atlassian to have it enabled. You can do a support ticket, and I've had pretty quick turnaround with that, so it'll be enabled pretty quickly. And the legacy view is still available. You can click go to legacy experience, though Atlassian has said that it will be deprecated in a future release. They haven't specified when, but they said they are going to deprecate it eventually. All right, let's see. Great question, Barbara. Can you provide more information on training? Sounds like you're pretty new to Jira. I'll jump back to my slide here. Elizabeth, if you wouldn't mind sending a link to the Q&A panel or in the chat to our training services. We do have a Jira class coming up next week. We should have another one next year as well. I don't see it on this list, but I'd expect we pick that up again in probably February. Our Jira Bootcamp is a live and 3-day class. It goes all throughout all throughout configuring Jira. So it really starts with the very basics of what Jira is and why it was built. And it goes through how we use Jira, how we create work items in Jira, and then how we totally configure Jira as well. So it is geared a bit more towards the administration of the tool. I do think it's great, though, for users to attend as well, just to get an idea of what the tool is that you're interacting with. So even if you aren't going to administer it, it's really great to become a super user as well. So great, thank you for that question. And you can always reach out to us if you have any questions on training or if you have any trouble signing up for that. Right. Another question. All right, looking at the program board seems a bit overwhelming. Are teams able to actually plan with that? So we do see teams using the program board, but I will totally agree with you that at first it can be quite overwhelming. Just to reiterate a couple of those tips that we talked about earlier, really great to go ahead and update this to the normal view. It can be quite helpful to see the title of the work item you are looking at. Also, the legend can be quite useful. If you're brand new to this, great idea to just screenshot this and print it out so that as you're working with it, you can have that up or throw it on a different screen as well. So yeah, updating some of those configurations can be quite helpful. It does take a little bit of time, so if it feels quite overwhelming, that's okay. We often do a lot of training over this and how to use this in PI planning as well, so it can take a little bit of time to get used to there. All right, let's see. Again, the link to our training services are in the chat. You can also find them just by going to xvm.com. They're right there on the homepage. You can get to them as well. As far as there's a question about if Jira is recommended to do first. I do recommend learning Jira while you're, if you're looking to implement Jira Align, implementing Jira is also necessary. So learning that tool is absolutely recommended. A lot of times we do them together, but if you are working with Jira first, totally recommend doing some training around that. If you're looking to train a lot of people, reach out to us as well. We can do a group training as well. So yes, learning Jira is important to also working with Jira Align. All right, let's see, we got a couple more minutes here. Let's see if we have any other questions. All right, how good is Jira Align at catching those planning errors? So it is pretty good at catching planning errors. So while we're here on the program board, again, anything that is red or orange actually does have a planning error. So when we open these up, we see several different errors. Previously, we saw an error with a dependency issue. Here we see an error that our stories have not been accepted or split, and we are past the sprint that they were supposed to be completed in. So this is a great view for that. Couple other great views. The program room has a section that can be really useful. At the bottom of the backlog section, there is this misaligned story section. What this is really great for is seeing where you have stories assigned to a sprint that's outside of the PI that the feature is assigned to. So the intention is typically that we are planning out our features for a PI. We're breaking those down into stories, and those stories will be completed in that PI. But if a story gets planned in a sprint that maybe is in the next PI, this is going to signal that to you so that you can understand, okay, maybe we need to split that feature. Maybe we need to excuse me, maybe we need to talk to that team and make sure they plan that appropriately, etc. In the backlog, and this will typically show in this room as well, though we maybe just don't have an example of it here, but if you go to the backlog as well, there's a button called Orphan Objects. And this is really great for understanding really what your data is looking like. So if I filter this down real quick, here we can quickly see our items in this backlog for the program and PI selected that don't have an estimate pre-PI planning. That's really great to be able to see. Also, which ones aren't linked to a parent. So typically when we're creating our features, in this case, we are wanting to link those up the hierarchy. That's where we get the most value, is carrying out that hierarchy from story up to our theme or whatever layers you may call those. So this will identify features that don't have a parent, or if you were looking at the Epic backlog, which of those don't have a theme, as well as some of the other values as well. So this can be a really great place to come in and see, not necessarily that these are errors, but see how your data is shaping up here. All right. And that brings us right to the end of the hour. So thank you all very much for attending. Again, if you have any questions about Jira Align, XVM services, or any of the other Atlassian ecosystem tools, please feel free to reach out to us either on LinkedIn or my email on the screen. Thank you all very much for joining me, and good luck on your Jira Align journey.